The air is thick with heat. Dust clings to every breath, and the dry wind whispers like an old spirit across the cracked earth. Somewhere, far off, a bird screeches, a predator or a warning. No one knows. Below, where the cliffs part like a scar across the land, a boy crouches low to the ground. He's maybe 12 summers old, but already his eyes dart with the urgency of survival. His name doesn't matter, at least not yet, but what he's about to discover will echo for generations. Welcome to the first ambush. But before you enjoy the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel, but only if you really like what I'm doing here. Also, drop your location and what time it is where you are. I'm always curious who's out there on the other end of the firelight. Now, turn up the volume, and together let's begin today's journey of exploration. The boy shouldn't be here alone. The hunt had started well enough, 3 grown hunters, 2 adolescents, and him, the youngest, given a dull spear and the task of watching for stragglers. That usually meant doing nothing, and he was excellent at that. But then the chase began. A herd of large antelope-like creatures, maybe megalotragus, though his tribe just called them the loud ones, scattered. In the commotion, he ran too far, too fast. By the time the sun tipped high overhead, the dust had swallowed everyone else. He wasn't scared at first. After all, he'd memorized the route back. But the terrain had its tricks. He veered to avoid a patch of thornbrush, and then again to avoid a snake basking in the open, and before long the familiar was gone. That's when he saw it. At first, it looked like a shadow, an unnatural line in the land. But as he got closer, it became clear. A gorge, maybe 10 body lengths deep, carved by wind and water long ago. He crept closer and peered down. The drop wasn't sheer, it sloped. And better yet, the far end narrowed into a rocky funnel, with steep stone walls closing in like jaws. He dropped a pebble. It bounced, skidded, and came to rest near a pile of dried dung. Not old. He sniffed the wind. Something had been here recently, something big. And then he heard the grunt. Not human. He froze. The sound came from below. Heavy, rhythmic, like breathing through a broken drum. He leaned forward too far and slipped. Not far, but enough to send a small avalanche of pebbles clattering into the ravine. The breathing stopped, then thundered away. He scrambled back. The thing was gone. That's when the idea planted itself. It wasn't a fully formed thought. He was a boy, not a tactician, but it was a spark. The shape of the land. The way it narrowed. How a creature could be cornered in here. He ran. When he finally found his tribe again, they were furious and then relieved. He was punished with silence, 1 full day of being ignored, which in prehistoric society is basically being ghosted by your entire WhatsApp group. But on the 2nd day, he told his older brother what he'd seen. His brother laughed. You fell into a hole and now you think you're a hunter? Still, curiosity won out. The boy led them back all the way to the gorge. They looked. They nodded. They examined the dried dung. One of the elders crouched beside the drop and muttered something in the old tongue. The place had potential. It was not common at the time for humans to think of the land as a partner in the hunt. Terrain was something to endure, not to use. You hunted in the open. You ran things down or threw spears or scared animals into nets. But to trap something between rock and air, that was new. Over the next few days, the tribe circled the gorge, studying it. The elder used burnt sticks to sketch in the dust, a habit picked up from watching children draw with ash. They imagined a stampede, how animals might panic, how one might leap and another slam into it, how walls might make even the bravest creature feel fear. They tested sounds, clapped, howled, threw rocks to echo off the stone. One of the younger men joked that the walls made his singing sound better. He wasn't wrong. The echo chamber amplified everything. Shouting in the gorge felt like yelling into the sky. And then came the strange detail. They noticed that when certain plants were crushed underfoot near the base of the slope, they gave off a musky, almost sweet odor. Not food, not to humans, but possibly attractive to herbivores. A natural lure. So now they had 3 things. 1. A natural funnel. 2. An echo chamber that scared anything inside. 3. Scented plants they could trample intentionally. Add a few men with spears waiting at the narrowest end, and suddenly you had something more than a hunt. You had a trap. Of course, not everyone believed it would work. One man, nicknamed Two Scars, for reasons that will become obvious later, said this was boy thinking, childish and wasteful. Why risk it when they already knew how to kill? But there's something contagious about invention. Once the tribe saw the outlines scratched into the dust, curves, arrows, dots for spear holders, They couldn't unsee it. Plan had formed. And when you're living in a world where meat is life, where one successful kill can mean 10 days without hunger, well, sometimes you try the boys' crazy idea. Even if it might get you trampled. The wind was stronger today, enough to pull your breath sideways and make your skin feel like it had been scraped by sandpaper. It howled between the cliffs as if the gorge itself was warning them not to proceed. But the tribe didn't stop. They were too far in now. The plan, as rough and improvised as it was, had become something almost sacred. It wasn't just a hunting method anymore. It was a test of whether humans could outthink nature itself. They began preparations with urgency. First came the blocking work. The mouth of the gorge, where animals might try to flee, was too wide to guard completely. So they started dragging in thick branches, boulders, and sharpened sticks. No one called it a fence. They didn't have a word for that yet. But it worked like one. The older women and younger children helped gather stones to narrow the escape route even more. One girl, barely 6 summers old, discovered that dried mud mixed with crushed bone would stick better to the rocks than loose dirt. A strange, sticky paste that hardened in the sun. She became their first unofficial engineer. The men, particularly the hunters, argued over where to stand. One suggested the upper ridges, throwing spears from above. Another wanted to wait at the base, where the gorge squeezed tightest. Two Scars insisted he'd wait in the center. "Let them see my eyes before they die," he said, which sounded cool until you realized how dangerous it was. They practiced yelling together. Turns out, 5 people shouting from different ledges could make it sound like a stampede was coming from the other direction. Add a few hollowed-out gourds for resonance, and suddenly even the hunters were jumping at their own echoes. It wasn't art, but it was getting close to strategy. 2 days later, they found tracks, fresh ones, hoof prints big and wide. Maybe not the megalotragus, but something similar. A wild beast with horns like tree branches and eyes that darted like firelight. And they weren't alone. The herd had passed less than half a day before, and from the look of the tracks, they were moving cautiously, sniffing, pausing, then running again. The animals could sense something different in the area. Something dangerous. The hunters took their positions before dawn. The boy, yes, the same one who first discovered the gorge, was allowed to carry a real spear this time. Not a practice stick, not a rock. A real one, fire-hardened, with a point sharp enough to slice open bark. He was assigned to the echo line. His job: shout, bang rocks together, stir panic among the herd if it entered the gorge. Basically, prehistoric audio engineering. Then they waited, and waited. There is no patience like that of hunters, and no silence as loud as the one before the kill. Hours passed. The sun climbed high and some began to fidget. The boy was about to sit when he saw them. First, a flicker of motion beyond the ridge. Then the sound, hooves on dry earth. Several pairs. Maybe more. They were coming. The first beast appeared like a shadow slipping into the mouth of the gorge. Huge, cautious, muscles twitching. It sniffed the air. Paused. Then it stepped forward. Then another followed. Then another. A small group, 5 in all, entered the funnel. They weren't running yet. They were investigating. The scent trap, the crushed plants near the gorge, was working. At least partially, but they were too calm. The hunters sprang into action. With no command word, because language was still evolving, they did the prehistoric equivalent of screaming into a megaphone. They yelled, pounded rocks together, and launched a barrage of stones from above. The gorge roared, the beasts panicked, and it began. The herd surged forward. No time to turn. The funnel of rock became a death chute. One animal slammed into another. One tried to scale the wall, failed, then ran straight into the sharpened barrier. 3 made it to the kill zone. The boy, shaking, banged a rock like his life depended on it. One of the beasts turned toward him, eyes wild. He charged sideways, trying to escape. But 2 Scars stepped in, not from bravery but probably because he couldn't hear over the noise. The beast struck him, tossed him like a sack of roots, and kept going. Chaos, but also success. 2 animals were taken down inside the trap. One died almost instantly from a spear to the neck. The other flailed, horns catching in the rocks, before a coordinated team brought it down. The third escaped, bloodied but alive. When it was over, the gorge was a mess of dust, blood, and triumphant yelling. The tribe had done it. They had turned a piece of land into a weapon. 2 Scars survived, though he earned another scar to justify the name upgrade. 3 Scars never really caught on, though. People don't like breaking traditions. That night, around the fire, they celebrated with meat. Rich, fresh, and seared on flat stones. One of the elders spoke about the cliffs. How they now belonged to the people. Not just because they stood there, but because they had used them. The boy didn't say much. He sat quietly, chewing a chunk of roasted meat and staring into the flames. He was already thinking of the next gorge, the next bend in the land, because he knew, just like the others now knew, that the earth itself had become part of the hunt. The next morning brought silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the heavy hush that settles over a group right before they try something foolish again. The gorge, now stained with the memory of blood and dust, had proven itself. But for the tribe, success wasn't enough. 2 kills fed them for days, yes, but now they wanted more. If one trap worked, what would happen with a better one? With planning? With bait? They didn't say it aloud, but something had shifted. Hunting had always been a test of strength, endurance, and bravery. Now, for the first time, it was also a test of wit. That's when they made a decision that only a bunch of half-starved, sleep-deprived hunter-gatherers could make. They were going to do it again. Bigger. And this time, they were going to force the herd into the gorge. The preparation was brutal. They expanded the trap by reshaping the approach. Small rocks were piled into low walls, just enough to nudge the direction of charging animals. Bushes were uprooted. Thorns burned away. A clear channel was carved into the land, like a prehistoric cattle chute. The boy watched carefully as the elder directed this work with a burnt stick, once again drawing in the dust. He wasn't just scribbling this time, he was creating symbols. Arrows, swirls, marks for people and obstacles. It wasn't language yet, but it was close. That strange detail, the sweet-smelling plant near the gorge, was harvested and crushed underfoot. One of the women mixed it with animal fat and smeared it along the gorge walls. The smell became overwhelming, even to the humans. Someone joked, "If we don't catch beasts, we'll attract ghosts." Haha. Hilarious. Except nobody laughed too loud. In their world, jokes and omens lived in the same tent. The sun rose hot the next day. The tribe moved quickly, wearing as little as possible, smeared in ash and dust to dull their scent. From a distance, they looked more like earth spirits than people. It was equal parts camouflage and don't make eye contact with the mammoth gods. 2 of the fastest runners were sent ahead to find the herd. This was risky, especially since their only weapons were spears and the power of suggestion. But these were young men desperate to prove themselves. Within hours, they returned. They'd found the beasts again. And this time, they'd left a trail of broken twigs and trampled grass to guide the way. The plan? Startle the herd. Drive them in the right direction. Use noise and motion to manipulate their fear. The tribe took positions along the funnel. The boy returned to the echo chamber. This time he wasn't alone. 2 other children joined him, one with a bone rattle, the other with a gourd full of pebbles. Not exactly elite tactical gear, but it added to the atmosphere. Then the shouting started. It began in the distance. Sharp yells and whooping cries, echoing between the rocks. Then came the thundering hooves, like a storm had dropped from the sky. Dust clouds erupted. The boy's heart pounded. His mouth was dry. For a moment he forgot everything, until the first beast broke through the treeline. It was massive. A pelorovis, sometimes called the giant buffalo. Shoulders the size of a man's hut. Horns like carved scythes. Eyes full of panic and rage. And it was not alone. 6 more followed. A full herd, stampeding directly toward the gorge. The runners had done it. The beasts barreled forward, guided unintentionally by the walls of stone and brush. Some tried to turn, but every escape path had been narrowed or blocked. The scent, the noise, the motion, everything forced them on. And then they hit the funnel. Chaos. The echoes started, yells, rattles, pounding rocks. The gorge amplified it all, transforming human noise into a demonic roar. The animals panicked. One leapt straight into another. A third tried to scale the cliff wall, slipped, and crashed into a fourth. 2 went down before reaching the kill zone. One from a broken leg, the other from sheer collision trauma. The others charged forward. Waiting at the end were 6 hunters, spears raised, nerves fraying. The first beast reached them and was skewered mid-lunge. But another rammed into its side, knocking one man off his feet and sending him flying into the gorge wall. Still, the plan held. The confined space worked to the humans' advantage. The beasts couldn't turn, couldn't see clearly, could barely slow down. One after another, they were funneled into death. When it was over, 5 beasts lay dead. One escaped, limping, trailing blood. The tribe stood among them, exhausted, trembling, and stunned by what they had done. It wasn't perfect. One hunter had a dislocated shoulder. Another had a gash down his thigh that would take weeks to heal. The elder had nearly been trampled when he moved too close. But still, They had just taken down nearly an entire herd using little more than teamwork, rocks, and fear, and that was the moment when they realized something quietly powerful. The land didn't just feed them. It listened. As the meat was cleaned and the bones stripped, someone noticed a pattern on the cliff wall. Scrapes and blood smears that vaguely resembled, well, nothing specific, but it was haunting. A suggestion of movement frozen in stone. The boy touched it. He didn't speak, but later that night, he returned to the dust and drew the same curve again and again. A swirl, a spiral, a suggestion of the gorge's shape. It wasn't writing yet, but it was memory, the kind that wouldn't be forgotten. The morning after the hunt smelled of ash, blood, and fresh meat. Smoke curled gently from small cooking fires as the tribe worked their way through the carcasses. Slicing, drying, salting with ash, and stringing cuts of meat across wooden racks that looked more like jungle gyms for vultures. Everyone had a job. Even the children scraped hides or chased away the hyenas watching from the shadows. But beneath the routine, something had changed. The air carried pride. The successful ambush wasn't just a story anymore. It was the story. And as stories go, this one had everything. A wild charge, flying spears, bruises, roars, and even a guy named Two Scars who had somehow fallen in the exact same bush twice. One of the women sewed tiny bits of stone into a cloak to mark the victory. Someone else started carving the outline of the gorge into a piece of bone. Strange and jagged, but unmistakable. If prehistoric Instagram existed, this would have gone viral. But it wasn't all celebration. After the meat was stripped, the tribe did something else, something quieter. They returned to the gorge not to hunt, but to understand. They studied the way the animals fell. They examined hoofprints, blood trails, cracked rocks. The boy who had found the gorge crouched for hours, redrawing the path with a stick, over and over in the dust. Not because he wanted credit, but because he wanted clarity. One hunter pointed out that the dust cloud caused by the stampede had blinded the rear animals, making them run harder into the trap. Another noticed how the curved stone wall had turned their cries into echoes, confusing their sense of direction. But it was the elder who said the most important thing. He stood on a rock, looked across the scene, and muttered, "The land remembers what we teach it." Now, if that sounds like something Gandalf would say, that's fair. But in their world, land and memory weren't separate. The gorge wasn't just a place anymore. It had learned something, and so had they. Later that evening, the elder asked everyone to sit around the fire. Not for a feast, just for listening. This was rare. Usually, fire gatherings meant singing, or the occasional reenactment of Two Scars falling in slow motion. But this was different. The elder drew a shape in the dirt, a curved line, narrowing into a point. Everyone recognized it instantly. The gorge. He then tapped the wider end. "This is where they feel safe," he said. Then the narrow end. "This is where we wait." And finally, the space in between. "This is where they understand fear." It wasn't poetry, it was survival strategy. He called it the path of confusion. Not bad for a guy whose favorite tool was a stick. The tribe discussed how to improve the method. Some suggested leaving decoys, bundles of fur shaped like wounded animals to lure herds in. One joked about painting eyes on rocks to make them scarier. Another said they should dig holes in the ground to catch the beast's legs. But that was quickly vetoed after someone tripped into one during testing and landed directly on a cactus. Prehistoric booby traps. Not yet ready for prime time. Still, these ideas meant something. A new mindset was forming. They were no longer just hunters. They were strategists, engineers, early architects of the kill. That's the real impact of that second ambush. It wasn't just the meat, it was the shift in thought. Hunting wasn't only about muscles anymore. It was about patterns, rhythm, timing, and terrain. And maybe, just maybe, about planning ahead. This, for a species that was still learning to count beyond 10, was revolutionary. And then came the lesser-known moment. After the fire had burned low and most people had drifted off to sleep, the boy remained. He sat near the embers, carving something into a piece of bark. Nobody paid him much attention. He was always sketching these days, lines, curves, swirls. People thought it was just how he passed time. But what he was doing was recording. Not just what had happened, but how. A spiral meant the gorge. Dots meant hunters. Lines of XS showed the movement of the herd. It was a kind of visual language, symbols tied to memory. You could look at it and remember not just what happened, but how it unfolded. It wouldn't be accurate to say he invented maps, but it would be fair to say he planted the seed. Thousands of years later, humans would draw battle plans, write manuals, and diagram military formations. But it all started here, in the dirt with a stick beside a fire. Of course, not all changes go smoothly. Two Scars, despite being everyone's favorite punchline, was not thrilled by all the new thinking. He still believed the best way to hunt was to chase something down and hit it with sharp objects until it stopped moving. His motto was strength, not tricks. Unfortunately, he also said this while slipping on goat droppings, which somewhat undercut his message. Still, there was tension. Not everyone wanted to change, and that's when the elder made a suggestion. Pass it on. Let the next generation try. Teach the children how to use the gorge. Let them see the strategy. Let them practice it. And for the first time, the tribe didn't just hunt. They trained. They walked the younger ones through the funnel. Let them shout into the echo chamber. Had them draw lines in the dirt and explain where they would stand, where the beasts would run, where the trap would snap shut. It was clumsy, sometimes hilarious, but it worked, because for the first time, the tribe had turned a hunt into a lesson. And so, under the same stars that had always watched them, they became something more than survivors. They became students of the land, and in the memory of blood, stone, dust, and fire, they began carving out something entirely new. The future. The story spread like fire on dry grass. It began with visitors, small neighboring bands who'd come to trade flint blades or salted roots. They heard about the gorge. They heard about the trap. At first, they thought it was an exaggeration. No one truly believed you could control beasts with rocks and echoes. But then they saw the bones. They saw the marked stone where the kills had taken place, the drying racks filled with meat, the carving on bark left by the boy, now referred to half-jokingly as Stonefinger for his obsessive drawing. They asked questions. They followed the spiral lines with their fingers, and something lit up behind their eyes. Curiosity, and then imitation. Within moons, other clans attempted similar ambushes. Some used river bends. Others funneled herds toward bogs or cliffs. A group near the mountains used a sharp slope to create a natural trap for goats, adding sharpened sticks at the bottom. One hunter called it death grass. Another just said, effective. What had started as an accident, one boy lost in a gorge, had now evolved into a concept. The land can be part of the hunt. It wasn't written in books, of course. There were no scrolls, no chalkboards, no TED Talks titled, How to Weaponize a Gorge in 7 Simple Steps. But word of mouth was enough. Prehistoric people were excellent storytellers. Their memories had to be sharp, because forgetting how to find water could literally kill you. So when they retold the ambush tale around fires, it wasn't just a hunt story. It was a strategy lesson, wrapped in drama, heroism, and the occasional exaggerated fall from 2 scars. The boy, for his part, remained oddly quiet. He didn't ask for praise. He didn't become a chief. He didn't even start charging people for strategic consulting services, which would have been difficult, since currency didn't exist yet. Instead, he just kept drawing. By now, his sketches were more than random shapes. They had evolved into a system, a visual shorthand that could be shown to others. Curved lines for landforms, crosses for people, dots for herd movement, waves for sound. And while nobody said it outright, everyone could feel it. This was important. They didn't have words like cartography or theory of tactical encirclement, but they had a growing awareness that some people could see the hunt before it happened. And here's the strange historical fact of the day. Some of the earliest cave paintings found by modern archaeologists, especially in places like Lascaux, France, aren't just animal drawings. Some of them appear to be movement patterns. Hunters, prey, obstacles, mapped in stylized form. Were they early hunting diagrams? Memory aids? Teaching tools? We may never know for certain, but based on stories like this, it's not hard to imagine, especially when you consider the evidence. Bones broken the same way in multiple locations, traps that use terrain features repeatedly, and artistic depictions of spirals, funnels, and spears in formation. This wasn't random evolution. This was human intention. Back in our story, seasons past, the gorge was used again, carefully, sparingly, and only when the signs were right. The tribe knew not to overhunt. If the herds disappeared, the gorge would become just a dry crack in the earth again. Instead, they refined their methods, sharpened their spears, improved their formations. One man even began shaping stones into animal figures, placing them near the gorge to confuse the spirits of the beasts. Whether it worked or not, no one argued. Superstition and strategy lived side by side. Still do, and just like that, they had crossed a line. They were no longer just reacting to the world. They were shaping it. The final lesson came in the form of an elder's quiet words, whispered to the boy one starless night. You changed the hunt, but the real change is here. He tapped his forehead. Now, we see the ground differently, and that's the lasting gift of the first ambush. It wasn't just about killing smarter. It was about seeing opportunity where there had only been dirt and stone. It was the shift from instinct to insight, from chasing beasts to manipulating the battlefield, from predator to strategist. And so, if you ever find yourself standing in a narrow valley with echoes bouncing off the walls, and your heart pounding as something huge thunders toward you, remember this: you're not the first. Someone, thousands of years ago, stood exactly where you are, gripping a fire-hardened spear and praying that the rocks would trap the beast the way he dreamed they might. And if they didn't, well, he'd be the one who inspired someone else to get it right. After all, innovation is rarely born from comfort. It's usually born from falling into a gorge and getting scared half to death. So next time you're facing a challenge, just remember the lesson of the first ambush. Use the land. Use your mind. And if all else fails, make a lot of noise and hope the scary thing runs the right way. Thanks for sticking around till the end. If you like this story, you know what to do. Hit that like button, share this with someone who enjoys ancient strategies, and subscribe for more strange, smart stories from the edge of human memory. And one last thing, drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is. I love seeing this little global tribe we're building. Until next time, keep your eyes open, your plans clever, and never underestimate the power of one kid with a stick.